Hey guys, tonight we drift into one of those strange little corners of mythology where chaos, wine, and naps all come together in a way that feels just barely believable. Imagine a sun-soaked hillside in ancient Greece, buzzing with cicadas, where vines twist themselves into unruly tangles. The air is sticky with sweetness, and somewhere in the distance, a flute trills off-key. That's where you find Dionysus, the god who gave the world its first taste of fermented grape juice, standing knee-deep in what looks less like a vineyard and more like an unruly jungle. Grapes droop heavily from their vines, goats keep sneaking into the rows, and the ground is so soft and shady you could lie down right there and vanish into a nap, which, spoiler alert, people did. Of course, if you actually tried lying in a vineyard today, you'd probably wake up covered in ant bites, dehydrated, and regretting every decision. You probably won't survive this experiment in real life. But don't worry, tonight's journey is much safer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop your location in the comments. It's always fun to see this sleepy little community stretching across time zones. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down that hillside, sandals slipping on loose earth, the smell of ripening grapes making the air thick and sticky. Dionysus is not what you expect. No thunderbolts, no lightning, just a tall figure with a wreath of ivy looking amused at the mess around him. Historians still argue whether vineyards began as neat, intentional plantings or as wild clusters that humans decided to cultivate later. But here in the myth, it looks suspiciously like a divine accident. Goats are everywhere. That's not just storytelling fluff. Ancient farmers actually noticed that goats loved munching on grapevines, sometimes helping prune them into healthier growth. Quirky tidbit: the word tragedy in Greek literally means goat's song, a nod to how goat-related rituals wound their way into early performances connected with Dionysian worship. So the idea of goats bleating and chewing in the middle of this vineyard is not just comic relief. It's a little origin story tucked inside another. As you lean against a tree, you notice how shady it is beneath the sprawling vines. The branches tangle into a kind of leafy canopy, perfect for shelter from the sun. You can almost hear the sigh of a farmer lying down, using a sack of grapes as a pillow. Maybe that's the real moment of invention. Someone meant to guard the vines, but the buzzing heat was too much, and they nodded off. Dionysus, pleased with his new domain, lets the nap slide into tradition. You walk further and see baskets of grapes left too long in the sun, skin splitting, juice pooling at the bottom. That smell, that faint sharpness in the sweetness, is fermentation beginning. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient peoples likely discovered alcohol by accident, when natural yeasts turned sugars into something stronger. Picture the first unlucky soul who tried it. Maybe a farmer tasting spoiled juice, maybe a brave goat chewing on half-rotten fruit. Surprise! Suddenly everyone feels a little lightheaded. You can almost hear Dionysus chuckling. Imagine him lifting a clay cup and saying, "See, even spoiled grapes can be useful." The people around him don't know whether to cheer, drink, or take another nap. The vineyard itself feels alive. Cicadas buzz, birds dart in and out, and the air is heavy with both promise and laziness. You watch as one farmer, after tasting too much of the sour juice, collapses in laughter, then rolls over into the grass. Another props himself against a vine post, eyes fluttering closed. Is this farming, or is this the beginning of something stranger? Historians still argue whether early vineyards were primarily about sustenance or ritual. Were people trying to store calories in liquid form, or did they stumble straight into using wine as a tool for worship and altered states? Either way, naps seem to slip into the picture, whether as recovery from intoxication or as a natural response to warm afternoons. Among the vines, you crouch down, fingers brushing the soil. It's surprisingly soft, mulched by fallen leaves, goat droppings, and years of growth. No wonder people kept falling asleep here. Nature had already prepared the mattress. You lie back for a moment, staring up through the leafy roof. Light flickers down in broken shards, and you realize the first vineyard wasn't just about drink. It was about creating a place where work, rest, and ritual blurred, and maybe that's the divine joke. Dionysus wasn't trying to invent a nap-friendly vineyard. He was just being himself, messy, playful, chaotic. But in the middle of that chaos, humans discovered something that made hot afternoons bearable. Grapes gave them wine, and the vineyard gave them shade. Together, they gave permission to rest. You stand again, brushing leaves from your tunic, and watch as Dionysus disappears deeper into the vines. Somewhere a goat sneezes, somewhere else a farmer snores. And you, caught in the middle, begin to suspect that this accidental discovery is about to spiral far beyond one hillside. The vineyard doesn't stay quiet for long. You walk further down the slope, and the smell of fermenting grapes grows stronger, a sweet, sour perfume that sticks to your nostrils. Baskets overflow with purple fruit, some carefully stored, others forgotten in the sun. A few cracked clay jars lean against a tree, their contents bubbling in ways that make you raise an eyebrow. You didn't need a chemistry degree to guess what's happening. Nature is running its own experiment, and Dionysus seems perfectly content to let it play out. You lean close to one jar, hear the faint fizz, and realize the grape juice is alive, with yeast. This is the first accident of fermentation, wine being born without anyone's permission. Historians still argue whether winemaking started in the Caucasus Mountains, in Mesopotamia, or somewhere else entirely. But myth insists on this. Dionysus was wandering, bored, and stumbled across the trick by sheer chance. And once you've tasted something like this, sharp, sweet, a little dizzying, you can't quite forget it. Of course, too much tasting leads to a problem. You can't walk straight. You watch one farmer stagger into a row of vines and collapse face first into the shade. Another just shrugs, ties a rope between two trees, and lies back on it like an impromptu hammock. It creaks alarmingly, but holds. Suddenly, nap culture isn't just about soft grass anymore. It's about invention. A hammock strung up between grape-heavy branches becomes the perfect place to swing, sip, and snooze. Quirky tidbit. Early hammocks weren't Greek at all. They came centuries later from the Caribbean, woven from bark fibers. But here, in this playful mythic vineyard, you can almost imagine a prototype. Some sleepy vineyard worker stretches vines into a crude sling, lies down, and discovers bliss. Whether it's historically accurate or not, the visual is too perfect to resist. Wine dripping nearby, shade overhead, and someone rocking themselves into unconsciousness. You wander deeper, where the rows thicken into a green labyrinth. Farmers have propped wooden poles against the vines, and wide cloths hang above like makeshift awnings. They've turned grape tending into something like a campsite, with cushions, baskets, and half-finished naps scattered about. A man snores softly beneath a fig tree. Another has curled up next to a wine jar as though guarding it with his life, though the slack jaw and steady breathing give him away. He's lost to dreams. It's easy to laugh, but there's logic here. You work hard under the sun, you drink whatever liquid comfort you have, and then your body demands rest. Modern science would call this a food coma, amplified by alcohol. The ancient Greeks just called it life. You stretch out beneath the vines and realize how cool the air feels here. The leaves form a canopy so thick that sunlight only dribbles through in patches. You let your eyes wander across the shifting patterns, and the rhythm of breeze and insect hum makes you drowsy. A nap feels almost inevitable. Dionysus, somewhere in the shadows, probably approves, mainstream historical fact. In many Mediterranean cultures, the idea of a mid-afternoon rest, what later became siesta, wasn't just tradition, it was survival. Working through the hottest hours could be dangerous, so rest became part of the daily rhythm. It's easy to see how vineyards, with their ready-made shade and occasional tipsy stupor, fit right into that schedule. But the line between necessity and indulgence was blurry. You look around and realize that no one is rushing back to work. Grapes still hang heavy, waiting to be picked, but the workers have melted into the scenery. Maybe Dionysus had planted the idea that naps weren't laziness, they were worship. After all, what better way to honor a god of pleasure than by surrendering to drowsiness in his domain? You hear laughter from a group lying in the grass. They pass a clay cup from hand to hand, each sip followed by a yawn. Someone tries to tell a story, but halfway through forgets where it was going. The others chuckle and roll onto their sides. It feels less like a vineyard and more like an open-air dormitory. There's a scholarly debate you can't ignore. Was Dionysus always a god of wine and ecstasy, or did he start as something else? A fertility spirit, maybe, or even a foreign deity imported from Thrace or Asia Minor? If he began as a stranger among the Olympians, then maybe his vineyard naps were the ultimate calling card. Here, I've brought something different, something that blurs work and rest, waking and dreaming. The naps aren't accidents, they're invitations. You glance back at that hammock-strung worker. He's already drooling, one sandal dangling off his foot, the rope swaying gently. It's clumsy, a little absurd, but undeniably comfortable. You can't help but think this might be the most practical invention ever born from a myth. Forget fire or the wheel. Give humanity shade, wine, and a place to sleep, and they'll manage the rest. And maybe that's the true genius of Dionysus. Not just giving wine, but creating a culture around it. You feel yourself sinking into the grass, vines rustling above you like a lullaby. The world blurs, the sour sweet smell, the soft earth, the echo of laughter fading into snores. You realize you're no longer just visiting a vineyard. You're inside a story where naps and grapes belong to the same myth, stitched together by accident and joy. By the time you sit up again, the vineyard feels less like farmland and more like a temple. The makeshift hammocks have multiplied, shade cloths hang like banners, and someone has even built a low stone altar draped in ivy. You rub your eyes, wondering if you're still half asleep, but no, it's a ritual forming in real time. Dionysus hasn't just handed over wine and naps. He's planted a new kind of worship that looks suspiciously like a party. You shuffle closer and notice a circle of worshippers swaying with cups in hand. Their voices rise and fall in something between song and chant, equal parts reverence and drunken mumbling. One man waves a branch of ivy like a holy symbol. Another clutches a goat kid under one arm, trying to keep it from eating the offerings. The whole scene is equal parts holy and hilarious. You can't decide if you should laugh or kneel. Here's the odd thing. Many historians agree that Dionysian rituals did have this mix of chaos and devotion. They were ecstatic, often involving music, dancing, even frenzied states. But historians still argue whether naps were a core part of it or just an accidental side effect. You watch as the singing slows, one worshiper slumps against the altar, and soon half the congregation is snoring in the grass. It's hard to tell whether this is sacred rest or just exhaustion after too much wine. Quirky tidbit. Some sources claim that women known as maenads would run wild during Dionysian rites, dancing through the forests, tearing branches, and chanting into the night. Imagine that, but then cut to the morning after, when half the group is curled up under trees, vines for pillows, utterly spent. The frenzy may have made the headlines, but the naps were the quiet truth that followed. You sink into the circle, watching the rhythm of it unfold. First the music swells, flutes, drums, stamping feet, then the frenzy peaks, dancing, laughing, wine spilling everywhere. And finally silence settles, like a blanket. One by one the dancers fold to the ground, letting sleep claim them where they fall. It's a cycle, ecstasy followed by slumber, chaos balanced by calm. You try it yourself, sip the wine, clap to the beat, let your body sway. Soon your head feels heavier, the drum slower, the air thicker. Your eyelids droop as if weighted with sand. You sink into the grass and let the world dim around you. This, you realize, is how worshippers of Dionysus balance the unbearable intensity of life. By surrendering to both extremes, by giving equal devotion to wild celebration and to quiet surrender. Mainstream historical fact. In Athens the city, Dionysia was a major festival that eventually gave birth to theater itself. Crowds gathered for days of performances, competitions, and feasting. Imagine the noise, the crowds, the endless chatter, followed by the inevitable collapse into naps under shaded porticos. Even the most cultural event needed its rest breaks. Without them, theater might never have become a tradition. You stretch and glance around. A group of worshippers has tied vines into crude wreaths, crowns of greenery drooping over their eyes. They laugh at nothing in particular, then sprawl in a heap like children after recess. Their goat bleats once, then lies down too. It's contagious. Sleep ripples through the gathering like a second hymn. You can't help but chuckle. Imagine priests today telling congregations, sing loudly, dance wildly, drink deeply, and then, please take a 20-minute nap before you drive home. Maybe the world would be calmer, but there is an undercurrent of seriousness too. Scholars debate whether these rituals were harmless revelry or dangerous challenges to social order. The authorities often frowned on Dionysian cults, accusing them of undermining discipline. Maybe the naps were part of that suspicion, people abandoning work, letting duty dissolve into slumber. To the ruling class, that probably looked like rebellion disguised as laziness. Still, lying there among the worshippers, you see something else. It's not rebellion, it's relief. Life in the ancient world was hard. Fields to plow, wars to fight, debts to pay. Here in the vineyard, people could escape that for a while. The god gave them permission to laugh, to drink, to rest. Even if the priests framed it as divine ecstasy, the simple truth was people needed a nap, and Dionysus gave them one. The ritual winds down, the altar flickers with its last candle, the goat wanders off, and the grass is littered with bodies in peaceful repose. You stretch out once more, head pillowed on your arm, and think, if this is religion, it might be the most human form of it you've ever seen. When you wake again, the vineyard is quieter, but not deserted. The crowd is thinned, replaced by travelers, traders, and even a Roman or two, all sniffing around with interest. What began as a local hillside nap fest has spread like gossip. At a banquet, you can almost see the word traveling. There's a god who gives you wine and lets you sleep it off in the shade. That's a marketing campaign strong enough to cross seas. The Greeks carry it first, hauling grapevines to new colonies, planting them in soil as foreign as southern Italy or the coast of Spain. You trudge along behind them, sandals collecting. Dust, watching as each new settlement tries to copy the original vineyard vibe. They don't just bring cuttings, they bring the whole culture of rest, long afternoons, wine diluted with water, and plenty of excuses to lie down. Somewhere between fieldwork and feasting, naps keep sneaking into the schedule like uninvited but welcome guests. Mainstream historical fact. The Romans later perfected viticulture, turning wine-making into an empire-wide business. Amphorae of wine crossed the Mediterranean like Amazon packages, stacked in ships' hulls by the thousands. Every banquet, every roadside tavern, every soldier's ration included wine. And if you've ever eaten and drunk too much at midday, you know exactly what happens next, the urge to sprawl across a couch and drift off. You follow a Roman nobleman into his villa. He reclines on a couch because Romans never sat upright at meals if they could help it. They dined lying down, propped on cushions, draped in tunics, while slaves carried trays of olives, bread, and of course wine. It's not hard to imagine half the guests nodding off between courses. The official word might have been convivium, living together, a feast. But the unofficial motto could have been nap when you must. Quirky tidbit. Roman bathhouses sometimes had designated restrooms, cool chambers, where bathers could stretch out after a soak. Picture it, steam rising. From the pools, conversation echoing, then a room lined with couches where citizens drowsed like cats in the sun. The vineyard naps of Dionysus had migrated indoors, institutionalized by architects who understood that rest was as essential as marble and mosaics. You stroll through one of these baths, the marble slick beneath your feet, the air humid with eucalyptus. A senator snores softly, towel draped over his belly. A child curls up beside a mosaic of dolphins, dreaming of something far gentler than politics. You pause, realizing the line between worship, leisure, and necessity has blurred completely. What began as a god's happy accident now underpins the empire's rhythm. Historians still argue whether siesta-style naps in the Roman world were universally practiced or more of an elite luxury. Farmers probably had less choice. Field didn't plow themselves. But even among the working class, the hottest hours demanded rest. You picture vineyard workers in Gaul, wiping sweat from their brows, collapsing under trellises, reenacting the same scene you saw back with Dionysus' first followers. Some traditions refuse to die, especially when they feel this good. The empire sprawls, and so does the culture of wine and rest. You see amphorae stacked at ports in Alexandria, ships rocking with the weight of liquid sleep. In Gaul, vines twist along river banks and villagers build shaded pavilions beside them, just perfect for lying down. In Hispania, Roman soldiers finish drills, then sneak off for naps under olive trees, bellies full of rations washed down with thin wine. You can't help but laugh. Imagine the legions, hailed as the fiercest military force of their age, reduced to lines of armored men snoring against their shields. It might not fit the heroic image, but it fits the human one. As you wander, you notice the tension too. Not everyone approves. Stoic philosophers preach moderation, warning that too much wine and sleep dull the spirit. Hardline senators grumble that naps are signs of decadence, evidence that Rome is growing soft. But you've walked the vineyards, lounged in the baths, and stretched out under vines. You know the truth. These naps aren't weakness. They're survival, joy, and maybe even a quiet form of rebellion against endless toil. By the time dusk falls, you find yourself back in another vineyard, this one neatly ordered in Roman rows. The vines march in straight lines, disciplined like legions, but the same old truth lingers. In the shade beneath them, a farmer snores. Centuries have passed, empires risen, but nothing has erased the gift Dionysus stumbled upon. You lie back beside him, watching the sky fade to purple, and think. Empire or not, the vineyard nap remains undefeated. Even as the evening deepens, the vineyard hums with subtle life. Cicadas chirp from the edges, shadows lengthen across the neatly aligned vines, and a gentle breeze carries the faint aroma of ripening grapes. You wander through the rows, barefoot, now toes brushing soft earth, and you notice how quiet the world becomes once the frantic activity of day subsides. Somewhere, a farmer shifts in his sleep, a loose hand brushing against a bunch of grapes, and you can't help but smile. The vineyard is not just a place for work, it's a sanctuary, a rhythm that hums between labor, indulgence, and rest. You pause beside a sun-bleached stone wall where ancient tools are left forgotten, pruning hooks, baskets, a clay jar chipped at the rim. You pick one up, feel the rough edges, and imagine the first humans, hands sticky with juice, muscles aching, eyelids heavy, discovering that wine and naps are intertwined. Quirky tidbit. In some myths, Dionysus himself is said to have tested the effects of his wine on mortals, noting who became ecstatic, who became sleepy, and who simply laughed uncontrollably. It's as if the god was less concerned with order and more intrigued by human responses to pleasure. You trudge along a shaded path lined with vines, noticing that a few leaves glint gold in the last sunlight. The vineyard has spread across the Mediterranean into Italy, Gaul, and beyond, each colony adapting the formula slightly. Some cultures added music, others added elaborate shade structures. Yet at the core, the principle remains: wine and rest go hand in hand. Historians still argue whether Dionysus intended this mix of ecstasy and repose, or if it truly was a happy accident that humans embraced over centuries. But standing here, listening to the soft rustle of leaves, it doesn't matter. The pattern is undeniable. You sit at the edge of a small clearing, leaning against a vine-wrapped post. Somewhere nearby, a group of children plays quietly, trying to imitate the grown-ups with tiny cups of grape juice, swaying in mock ecstasy before collapsing into giggles. Mainstream historical fact: many ancient festivals included activities for all ages, though intoxication was strictly adult only. Still, imitation was part of learning. Even the youngest members of a community absorbed the rhythm of celebration, followed by rest. You tilt your head back, letting the last golden rays kiss your face. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleats softly, perhaps reminding you of the first vineyard, where animals and humans intertwined in chaos and rest. The day's excitement has faded, replaced by gentle evening quiet. You notice the vineyard seems almost to breathe, a living organism shaped by centuries of human and divine intervention. There's a moment when you realize the vineyard nap is not just myth, ritual, or historical fact. It is a meditation on balance, a quiet rebellion against the relentless pace of life. You feel your own body surrender to the pull of drowsiness, and a slow smile spreads across your face. The cycle of work, play, and rest feels natural, inevitable, and surprisingly comforting. In the half-light, you drift along the vine-lined path, senses tuned to subtle sounds: a leaf trembling in the breeze, the distant clink of a jar, the soft exhale of a resting body. Scholars debate endlessly whether Dionysus truly invented the vineyard nap, or whether the practice emerged organically over generations. Yet, here in this moment, the answer is clear. Whether accident or intention, it works. Humans have always needed moments of reprieve, and the vineyard provides them, wrapped in sun, shade, and a hint of fermented grape sweetness. You lie down among the vines one final time, letting your gaze follow the stars that appear above. The day's lessons linger. Chaos and order can coexist. Indulgence can be instructive, and even the god of wine understood that pleasure is best paired with rest. You hear the distant echo of laughter and snores blending together, a chorus that somehow feels eternal. And so, you close your eyes, letting the world soften around you. Every leaf, every droplet of dew, every faint rustle is a gentle nudge into serenity. You inhale the earthy sweetness of the vineyard one last time, feel the warmth of the ground beneath you, and surrender to the slow rhythm of drowsiness. The story of Dionysus' accidental nap-friendly vineyard fades gently, leaving only calm, comfort, and the quiet whisper of myth weaving into your own dreams. The sun has disappeared completely, leaving the vineyard bathed in twilight. Shadows stretch and blend, softening edges, and the air cools just enough to make your skin tingle pleasantly. You feel every muscle relax, every thought slowing, like honey dripping from one moment to the next. Somewhere far off, a flute plays a note so faint you barely hear it, yet it lingers, threading through the leaves and vines, nudging you toward calm. You breathe slowly, deliberately, tasting the lingering sweetness of the grapes, the soft scent of earth and moss. The world feels wider and quieter, as though the chaos of daytime, laughter, work, movement, has melted into this perfect still evening. Every sound, every scent, every sensation reminds you that rest is natural, that even the busiest life needs pauses. You feel a gentle drowsiness brushing over your mind, a soft insistence to release, let go, and sink. The vineyard itself seems alive in this quiet moment, each vine swaying lightly, each leaf catching the faint moonlight. Somewhere nearby, a goat shifts in its sleep. The occasional hum of insects adds a rhythm that feels like a lullaby. You imagine Dionysus smiling somewhere in the shadows, content that his small accident, wine, shade, and naps, has become something larger than himself, something that echoes through centuries and touches moments like this. Your thoughts grow, softer, less focused, like clouds drifting over the horizon. You feel the pull of dream, the gentle tug of rest. There's no urgency here, no task to complete, no expectation other than to breathe, listen, and let yourself dissolve into the soft rhythm of the vineyard. You surrender to the night, to the story, and finally, to your own quiet, unhurried slumber.